Rejection from Riyadh as the United States points the finger of blame at the Saudi Crown Prince for approving the killing of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi in October 2018. Rubber bullets are fired in Yangon as police in Myanmar crack down on the latest round of anti-coup rallies, with several people arrested. This as the country's UN ambassador calls for action to be taken to stop the ruling generals in their tracks. And search and rescue efforts continue in earnest in Nigeria to try and find 317 abducted schoolgirls. This as the governor of Niger State announces that 42 other people kidnapped from a separate college a week ago have now been released. Hello and welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Thomas Waterhouse. First for you this hour: inaccurate, false and unacceptable. Those are just some of the words chosen by Saudi Arabia to describe the declassified report released by the US about the killing of Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul in 2018. That report suggests that it was highly unlikely that the murder of the journalist could have taken place without the green light of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The US Secretary of State says that Washington is, though, still keen to recalibrate and not rupture its ties with Riyadh. Fraser Jackson picks up the story.
Just over 2 years after journalist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered in the Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul, a long-awaited US intelligence report has found that Saudi de facto ruler Mohammed bin Salman viewed him as a threat to the kingdom and likely approved his killing. Kept under wraps by the previous administration, the report has now been declassified, and President Biden promised to hold the kingdom accountable.
I spoke with the king, not the prince. Made it clear to him that the rules are changing, and we're going to be announcing significant changes. We are going to hold them accountable for human rights abuses, and we're going to make sure that they, in fact, and if they want to deal with us, they have to deal with it in a way where human rights abuses are dealt with.
On Friday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that the US had imposed visa restrictions on 76 Saudi individuals accused of threatening overseas dissidents. He also said the US was reviewing outstanding arms sales to the kingdom to make sure they were being used for defensive purposes. But the sanctions stopped short of impacting the Crown Prince himself.
The relationship with Saudi Arabia is bigger than any one individual. So what we've done by the actions that we've taken is really not to rupture the relationship, but to recalibrate it, to be more in line with our interests and our values.
Riyadh has again denied the prince played any role in the murder. In a statement, the Saudi Arabian Foreign Ministry said the government completely rejected what it called the negative, false and unacceptable assessment and said it contained inaccurate information and conclusions. Despite the release of the report, it seems neither side is willing to lose a strategic partner. Riyadh has echoed the sentiments of the White House, saying it was keen to maintain ties.
3 separate media outlets in Myanmar are reporting that a woman has been shot and killed during an anti-coup rally in the central town of Monwia this Saturday. That development comes as fresh rallies against the military's takeover are being held in several cities, with police back out in force in Yangon to try and stop protesters from gathering there. Now, far away in New York, Myanmar's UN ambassador has urged the General Assembly to use all means possible to take action against the ruling generals and to provide, quote, safety and security for the people of Myanmar. Kami Nedelek reports.
Playing a cat and mouse game with authorities. Pro-democracy protesters in Myanmar were back on the streets. The police crackdown against demonstrators has stepped up in recent days. And on Saturday, security forces dispersed the crowds with tear gas in Dawei, while in Yangon, police fired rubber bullets. Dozens were detained, and at least 3 people have died since the start of the civil disobedience movement over 3 weeks ago. The protesters are buoyed up by a new key supporter. On Friday, the Myanmar ambassador to the United Nations urged them not to give up and raised his hand in a 3-fingered salute favoured by protesters.
We need further strongest possible action from the international community to immediately end the military coup, to stop oppressing the innocent people, to return the state power to the people, and to restore the democracy.
The military says it had to step in over accusations of election fraud in November 2020. But the then Electoral Commission said there was no evidence of this. The new post-coup Electoral Commission annulled the results of last year's polls. The country's internationally recognised and democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi was detained after being deposed. And she remains in custody over what Amnesty International says are trumped-up charges. She's set to appear in court on Monday.
Moving on, the opposition in Armenia has announced that the next few days will be decisive in their bid to see the Prime Minister stand down over the peace deal that he signed last year with Azerbaijan. Thousands have gathered in the capital, where a sea of tents have been erected by those who oppose Nikol Pashinyan, and barricades have also been built along one key artery. Pashinyan has accused the army's top brass of attempting to carry out a coup, and the US and the EU have both called for calm from all sides. France 24's Jonathan Walsh has sent this next report from Yerevan.
The Prime Minister is facing harsh critics and mounting political pressure since Armenia's defeat in Nagorno-Karabakh, a humiliation for many Armenians. And people here say he's the one responsible for that defeat.
Գործող վարչապետը կապիտուլյացիոն համաձայնագրով դավաճանեց հայ ժողովրդի շահերը եւ այսօր հայ ժողովուրդը իրեն դավաճանված է զգում։
Մենք այս պատերազմը չենք պարտվել։ Պատերազմը պարտվել է իշխանությունները։ Գործող իշխանությունը։ Դրա համար պետք է հրաժարական տա։
During the revolution that brought him to power in 2018, Armenians massively supported Nikol Pashinyan. This era is clearly over today, but the Prime Minister can still mobilize huge crowds. He showed it right here on Republic Square when he gathered 20,000 of his supporters after the Army Chief of Staff called for his resignation. And despite the recent military defeat against Azerbaijan, many Armenians still think he's the right man to lead the country.
Բաների իհարկե արել է կոռուպցիայի ամեն ինչի հետ կապված, որ վերացրել է հին կարգերը, ինչը որ սենց բոլորը գիտեն, բայց ոչ մեկ չէր բարձրաձայնում, ինքը այդ ամեն ինչը բարձրաձայնել է։
Փաշինյանը այնքանով պետք է լինի, քանի որ ինքը հենց բան չի արել, այս 2.5 տարվա մեջ շատ բան արել, ինքը ունի շատ բաներ անելու։ Մենք հավատում ենք, վստահում ենք մեր պարոն Փաշինյանին, որովհետև ինքը ժողովրդական մարդ է, հայասեր մարդ է, հայրենիք սիրող մարդ է։
The streets of Yerevan are calm, no sign of the attempted coup Pashinyan has denounced. But his political future is at stake as the pressure from his detractors keeps increasing.
To Africa now, and Nigeria's president says that his government won't cave in to the blackmail of what he's calling bandits and criminals. This as the army and the police there continue their joint efforts to retrieve 317 schoolgirls who were abducted by gunmen from their school in Zamfara state on Friday. Muhammadu Buhari has described the incident as being a gross violation of children's rights and a horrific experience for the youngsters to go through.
Parents crowded around the empty school as they awaited news of what happened to their daughters, snatched from their campus by armed men early on Friday. There's been no news of the 317 students since.
to sai kuma ta riga ta sai an ka sake shawara an ka ce a dawo a koma waya a tarbe su a bi ta dan daura zaman da ake yin sojojin suna tan cikin daji amma mu mun dawo gida.
The army is deployed in the forest region where they think the girls are being held, but for now the identity of the kidnappers is still unknown. Several armed groups are active in the area and the state governor closed all schools on Friday as a precaution. He called on the central government to do more to crack down on lawlessness in the region. This as Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari announced he would not be paying ransom. But the parents are hoping that the government will do whatever it takes.
The government, they are doing their best. We don't know what they are doing, but we know they are doing their best by now, inshallah.
The UN is calling for the girls' immediate release. It comes as mass kidnappings are becoming more commonplace in Nigeria. In 2014, over 200 schoolgirls were kidnapped in Chibok, prompting the then First Lady, Michelle Obama, to launch the campaign Bring Back Our Girls.
In these girls, Barack and I see our own daughters.
But to this day, over 100 of them have still not returned home.
Now, in a separate Nigerian development, other gunmen have released 42 people, including 27 pupils who were abducted from a science college last week in the Kagara district. That's according to the governor of Niger State. One boy was killed during the storming of that school. Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent in Lagos, and this is what Sam Olukoya had to say.
Yeah, the news about that has just come in, and I actually spoke with government officials. They were very not forthcoming. All they could say is that the children and other adults who were kidnapped have been released and have arrived at the state capital, Minna. I think maybe about now they will be meeting with the governor. There may be jubilation in the state capital, Minna, but the situation back home is one of mixed feelings. Jubilation that the children have been released, but sadness that just overnight, almost at the same time these children were being released, there was an attack in that area. 25 people were taken away, 4 people were killed. And when I called people there this morning, how do you feel? They say, how would they feel? More people have been taken away. They've given us those they took away, and they've come back to take some other people. And what they are saying is that they've released these children. How do these children come back to an environment where people were abducted just the same day they were kidnapped? So we still have this problem. It's not just about releasing people. It's about ensuring that this doesn't happen again.
To a result now which has led one congressional Democrat in Washington to describe herself as being a happy camper. By a vote of 219 to 212, the US House has approved a huge COVID-19 relief bill to the tune of $1.9 trillion. President Biden's party says the lingering pandemic and a struggling economy demands urgent and decisive action. The text will now pass to the Senate, but some Republicans are already describing the legislation as being bloated rather than bold. Staying with the COVID-19 pandemic, New Zealand's Prime Minister has announced that the 1.7 million people who call Auckland home will now face a 7-day level 3 lockdown, which will begin this Sunday morning local time. This less than a fortnight after a 3-day shutdown in the city. With fresh cases still being detected, schools and non-essential stores will close and movement in and out of the city will be restricted. The rest of New Zealand will be placed under level 2 restrictions. And finally, over 200 inmates still haven't been tracked down in Haiti after they escaped their jail on the outskirts of the capital. That outbreak left 25 people dead, including the prison's director. The Croix des Bouquets jail was built to hold 872 people, but nearly double that number were being held there at the time of the breakout. Solange Mougin reports.
Trying to regain control after Haiti's largest and deadliest prison break in a decade. Haitian authorities are scouring the country for remaining escapees. Officials said on Thursday that more than 400 inmates had managed to flee the Croix des Bouquets jail, which had been holding nearly twice its capacity of inmates.
Before yesterday's incident, there were 1,542 prisoners in the prison of Croix des Bouquets. After the checks were made today, we see 1,125 prisoners who are in prison.
Among those that the police managed to track down, one of Haiti's top gang leaders, Anel Joseph. Once Haiti's most wanted fugitive, Joseph had already tried to escape in July after announcing his intentions online. This time, the convicted murderer was spotted at a checkpoint and killed in a gunfight with police. During the jailbreak, other prisoners were killed, as were bystanders and the penitentiary's director. On Twitter, President Jovenel Moïse condemned the breach and instructed the national police to use all measures. This is not the first time inmates have escaped Haiti's jails. In 2014, in the same Canadian-built prison, 300 inmates escaped. And prior to that, in 2010, during Haiti's devastating earthquake, more than 4,000 prisoners fled in the chaos following the quake.
That brings you up to date, but do stay with us here on France 24. Our coverage of the latest international news continues.